Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Dr. Jane Thomason, who's a successful entrepreneur, having founded and built a 250 million revenue consulting company. Dr. Jane is a frontier tech and social impact thought leader, recognized in Forbes Magazine as blockchain's leading social development evangelist. She's awarded the top 10 digital frontier women and UN Decade of Women Quantum Impact Champion. Her work is focused on emerging economies and how frontier technologies can accelerate social transformation. Dr. Jane is the blockchain advisor to various international organizations such as the World Health Organization, Commonwealth Secretariat, the Kerala Blockchain Academy, and many more. She is also the author of Blockchain Technology for Global Social Change, Blockchainging the World, and Applied Ethics in a Digital World. So Dr. Jane, really appreciate and honored to have you on the podcast. Why don't we start?
It's great to be here.
India, being a country which is just rearing its head up, the economic power is becoming, giving the opportunity for common man to go ahead and do things. So how do you think it's gonna change and transform in a country like India, blockchain?
Well, look, I think that there's a number of different ways, and I'm very happy to even use examples of Indian startups and Indian work that I've been working with. So let's start with one which is called Emertech, and this is in Maharashtra, where a wonderful Indian entrepreneur called Gaurav Someshwani has actually onboarded more than 20,000 poor farmers, and he's helping the farmers create transparency in their supply chains and efficiency in their supply chains, get a better deal for the farmers, and cut out some of the middlemen in the supply chains. And so this is something which he's now growing and building and using it as an education tool for farmers as well. So projects like that can be really important for India because everyone knows that farmers are really struggling in India. And another one, which is sort of almost at the other end of the spectrum, but I think it's really interesting, during the pandemic, we saw the emergence of play-to-earn games. And in particular, in the Philippines, when the government locked the country down, people who live on the streets and who earn cash on the streets every day, maybe food vendors and so forth, they had no way to earn a living. And what people discovered in the Philippines, a community, that they could play this game called Axie Infinity, and they could actually earn enough money to put food on the table of their families. I mention this because I think this is the beginning of a creation of a new economy that never existed before. So people can actually earn money through gaming, but that is now being developed, not just for play to earn, but things like learn to earn, exercise to earn, to improve people's fitness. And again, I'm working with a wonderful Indian startup, Somesh Solutions, who've got an X to earn game called PlotX. And that's exactly what they're trying to do, is saying, what can we gamify where people can actually earn money for doing something of social relevance and importance? So they're kind of two ends of the spectrum. And then in the middle, I'd be wrong not to talk about the issue of financial inclusion. And I know that the Indian government is not particularly supportive of blockchain, but what it enables people to do is, if they simply have a mobile phone, you're able to send value to them, to their mobile phone, that they can then use for goods and services or for paying for their kids' school fees. So this is enormously important because we now have 70% of the world's population have access to mobile phones. And I went in 2017 to Chhattisgarh, actually with Gaurav, who's the supply chain guy, and he was working in Chhattisgarh, and the government was saying, look, if we buy 5 million cheap mobile phones, can we actually give these to our nomadic tribal people and then allow them to be able to use those to access government services? And can we use blockchain to help them access those services? So there are many examples. And then the final one, just again to speak about, is around healthcare, and in particular, looking at the possibilities of the metaverse in healthcare. And Apollo Hospitals Group has now partnered with a gaming firm to help them look at how they can use a metaverse to be able to extend and improve their services. So there's so many examples. And I probably have to do the last one, again, calling out another Indian group that I'm working with, the Universal Carbon Registry, is around the tokenization of carbon credits and encouraging not just through biogas, but also for what villages can do for regenerative agriculture or even water, because water is going to be a problem of the future. So the Universal Carbon Registry and a wonderful guy who runs that called Kishore Bhutani are working on tokenizing these carbon credits and allowing them to be sold on the voluntary market so that the people who produce them get a better deal. So I think blockchain is an incredibly powerful democratizing force that if people have the intention, and this is where your point about government is relevant, is people have to see what the possibility is and understand how they can enable or help this to grow. And I know, for example, India's got the corporate social responsibility law where companies have to invest a certain amount of money in social responsibility. Imagine if they said, well, 10% of that needs to go into tech for social impact, for example. This issue about how you get investment in tech in India could be, really helped if the government thought, well, they don't even have to give money. They're already telling the corporations that they have to give money for social impact. So give it for tech for social impact.
The examples you gave, obviously, they're so cool. And yes, I think there's a huge change that's been happening. So far, I think most of the entrepreneurs who've been doing business have done business in a way where you are extracting maximum value out of the consumers, because that's capitalism and, that's the way things function. But I think, the new breed of entrepreneurs are leveraging these new technologies and these ethos of these technologies for the blockchain, being a transparent, trust-based technology or like a metaverse, Web3, or being a technology which says it's going to take us from a centralized world to a decentralized world where things could be interoperable and open. Now, all of these ethos are nice, but let's dig a little deeper into it, because you mentioned about this new economy which is happening. I'm really excited about is these play to earn games which could give anybody sitting in any part of the world with the computer, and if you can play things, you could learn to earn. I think is such a fantastic ethos behind nudging those people to learn. And I think knowledge is the core of human growth. If you learn, you'll be able to create better businesses and you could become a better person. And you gave me examples of Emotech and this carbon cap registry, universal carbon registry startup out of India. Now, tell me, where does the money come from? If you are a startup and if you're paying to play these games, if you are paying these students to learn, what's the deeper? There has got to be something deeper. Like I'm sure you mentioned, we need more people to come in, the governments to come in, the tech companies to come in. How does a startup do that? Because that seems to be a mystery. Would you like to shine light on that?
Look, I think it's very hard still always for startups to get money. One of the things that's possible in blockchain is doing something which is called a token raise or a token sale. So one of the ways that startups can raise money is basically by telling people what it is they're doing, and working out, a structure for the token economics, and then selling tokens. There's a lot of marketing and there's a lot of technicalities and token economics to go with this, but they essentially sell the tokens and the people buy the tokens almost as you would have invested in a company in the traditional way. And that gives the startups enough money to be able to do the next stages of their roadmap. And so that's a very common way. Since about 2017, you might have heard of the initial coin offerings, ICO, which was very popular in 2017, and people raised, from modest amounts to huge amounts of money. The biggest token raise was $4.2 billion by EOS Block 1. And so people are still doing these token raises now using blockchain and its various affordances. But, there are others who are going the traditional route, and they're getting investment in the same way as the traditional investments into startups. But what we're also seeing, because, blockchain's really all around networks and communities. So what we're also seeing is people experimenting with getting communities, let's use the agri-tech example. So people who are involved in agri-tech, let's say there could be, 20,000 or 100,000 people involved in agri-tech, and creating an investment community around those people and allowing them to review new startups coming through and invest in the startups within their community. So this is a new model that's being experimented with at the moment. So what they do is they onboard communities, so like agri-tech, and then they use the community to provide the deal flow and to review the projects, and then they give them an opportunity to invest in the projects. So it's kind of a really interesting way of getting your analysis done, having experts looking at the new projects coming through.
Right. So I'm going to probe on that a little bit deeper. That there is Scott Galloway, who says that this decentralization is nothing but a re-centralization of sorts, because the VCs always run the game. They are the ones who invest in these Web3 or Metaverse startups, and the Metaverse, the ethos itself is very, very cool. Because so far all of our businesses have run on a top-down, hierarchical, centralized manner. Now these Web3 or blockchain companies, cryptocurrency exchanges, these entrepreneurs say that they're going to take us from a centralized to a decentralized world, and we're going to take us from a world which has been run in a very hierarchical manner to opaque manner to a world which is open, transparent. But most of these entrepreneurs, these blockchain entrepreneurs, or the ones who are vested in it, like there is these things called whales, as in, there's at least maybe 2% of the entire investors in the NFTs or the cryptocurrencies happen to be these whales. They own almost 90% of the entire cryptocurrency or the virtual digital assets or the NFTs. Is this just a narrative? Because we as a common man, we are really looking forward to this technology called blockchain, which says that it's a trust based technology, and it's going to take us from that opaque functioning world to a transparent world. Are we over expecting out of this technology? Or is it something which is just old packaged in a new thing? Is it like an advertisement gimmick, like diamonds are a girl's best friend? Since you've been invested in this, would you like to shine light on it?
Look, I think it's an interesting question, and to an extent you're correct. But the fact that there's challenges doesn't mean that the spirit and philosophy of decentralization is wrong. So you're quite correct. And on certain projects, you have, the majority of the tokens are owned by one or two people who have the capacity to basically control what's going on. But my interest, frankly, is less in the speculative tokens, but more in the underlying technology and how it can be applied to solve social problems. And I think, remember that, not blockchain, but Bitcoin came out of post-financial crisis when people were angry at the government, people were angry at the banks, and they wanted to create something that would allow this exchange of value that didn't require governments or banks to do. So there was a bit of a libertarian, anarchistic kind of philosophy in the beginning, when blockchain got going. But I think it's come a long way. You still have some people who are sort of passionately and boldly and almost religiously preaching decentralization. But I think that there's also a lot of people who are more in the middle who are saying, how can we use this tool to actually build systems and do things that are going to help solve some of the problems that we've had in, whether it's in healthcare or supply chain or identity and so forth. And so there's lots of people who are building really, really interesting and long-term projects that will benefit society. But having said that, to your point about decentralization, it's very mixed, because a lot of the blockchains, for example, if banks and healthcare providers are going to use blockchains, they probably won't use public blockchains because of the need for security and controlling the information flows. And so they'll probably use private or consortium blockchains. But that's not saying it's wrong. It's just people are going to use what works for them, considering whatever their needs are. But there's tremendous benefit for use of blockchain in secure data exchange in healthcare, for example. So I think we have ranges of decentralization. A lot of people probably are misleading about decentralization because there's always points of centralization. The protocol is a point of centralization. The people who run the nodes or servers, in a way, have more control over the system than the token holders. So, I think there's work to be done, and there's certainly academics and researchers unpicking this and trying to get clarity and transparency about what is and isn't decentralized, and also trying to solve these problems where if you have a decentralized autonomous organization, but one person, the tokens are given out in such a way as the majority token holder can entirely influence that DAO. And people are saying, well, that's not the spirit. How do we come up with another governance mechanism so that doesn't happen? So I would say it's a young industry. People are realizing problems all the time and are working to solve them.
Right. Yeah. I think, we in such an interesting space, because I think the first time in human history, we are challenging the norms, and we are completely relooking at things, trying to correct the wrongs. We are trying to see that, okay, the banking industry had a problem. So can we build a banking industry without the banks? That's cryptocurrency. We saying that, okay, these top-down organizations, the way they function with the politics and stuff, it's not the most apt. So can we build decentralized or autonomous organizations which is run by code rather than humans? But there are humans who are trying to get into the loop. Then we have the entire Web 2.0, which has been functioned, all of businesses, it's functioned in a profit at any cost manner. And now he's saying we can go from centralization to decentralization, where to opaqueness to transparent. So through the Metaverse and Web 3.0. So all of these, they are extremely cool. They sound so very nice, and I guess maybe eventually, I hope that while we are at it, while we are learning and building businesses, we actually go towards those ethos rather than being stuck in the midway. But I think we are in an exciting space. So someone who's been invested in leveraging blockchain for solving social problem, what do you think are the main challenges that you have faced, and what are the opportunities you think, if you looked at in a proper lens, could create huge global transformation?
Look, I think the challenges mostly is around a lack of understanding by people of what's going on with technology, and also sort of like linear thinking. So we grew up thinking things were centralized and that's the way the world works. And this challenges our thinking, and people still talk about digitalization to digitalize a process that they're now doing manually. That's not what transformation's about. Transformation is like completely rethinking industries and ways of doing things. And, I always say, this is a Steve Jobs moment, where he was imagining a day that you could hold a computer in the palm of your hand, which of course we all do now. And I think it's finding the people who can articulate what this future possibility could be, getting them to decision makers so that they can share that with them and help them understand how they could accelerate or incubate or enable that to happen at a larger scale. And then, of course, regulators need to be brought along as well, because they're worried, obviously, about this. They're worried about money laundering and terrorist financing and consumer protection. And so, trusted people need to be able to go and work with regulators and help them think about how they can enable these digital technologies to be used, but also consider how to protect consumers. And then, moving on to another topic that I'm interested in is, the ethics of what we're building and how we're building it, because there are a lot of things to think about. For example, if we're moving more and more things into the metaverse, do avatars have human rights? What happens if someone kills your avatar? How do you protect children in the metaverse? When you're in the metaverse and your physiological responses through wearables and so forth are being tracked in whatever metaverse that you're in, they're going to have more data someone's going to have more data on you than anyone's ever had before. And what do we think about that? And how do we protect the use of that data, for example? So there's a lot of questions that are yet to be asked. But my view is we don't stop innovating while we ask those questions. We make sure that we're asking those questions and that we're working with the technologists, and we're thinking about things like computer software engineers are not taught about ethics. So how do we give them the knowledge to think about the ethics of what they're building in their algorithms? And, those kinds of things. So I think everyone needs to be engaged in thinking about how we use this incredible technology to make our world better and to protect people. And I think that we need governments, we need researchers, we need the technologists, we need, people who are going to use the technology. We especially need the young people, because they're the ones who've got all these amazing ideas and they can see how this can change things. And they're the ones who are going to be living with the consequences of what we're doing at the moment. So, I think there's room for massive collaboration from so many people. And then it'll take one government. I mean, if you use, for example, Estonia, which is a very small country, but they were a very small, poor country when they came out from under communism, and they gave themselves a 10 to 15 year roadmap to become a digital economy. And that's one of the most impressive case studies in the world. So, you need obviously a bigger country to take a leaf out of their book and to just show. And I think, you're seeing incredible transformation that's taken place in China and Korea and Vietnam. I mean, I think that the growth and the transformation we're going to see in Asia probably more than anywhere else.
Right. I think you bang on. I mean, because I think China is doing some really, really amazing thing. Estonia has done so much amazing thing. I think, at times it's so very simple. You see these small nations, doing stuff, emulate that. Estonia has actually shown the importance of going, being digital first. Singapore has shown an example of a car light policy and what it does, the wonders to the environment in the country. So I mean, it's about taking a proactive approach and saying, rather than playing a wait and watch game, emulating those nations, because the examples are right over there, and understanding that what's been wrong and trying to correct. Because you rightfully mentioned, we need to take the youth, and they are the ones who are more brave, and they are raising these deep questions. Like the narrative today is that the cryptocurrency is extremely volatile. Most of the money laundering happens over there, but the opposite is the truth. The banking industry, there's something called as FinCEN files, which really shows, highlights that almost all of the top banks are deeply involved in money laundering, financing, or fossil fuel industry, and so on and so forth. So I think that we need to ask deeper questions, and I guess that's not been happening. And until we don't break out from the mode of a capitalistic profit at any cost functioning businesses, I don't think we'll move to the future, because anyway, in the next couple of decades, machines are going to get so intelligent that they'll be or creating automation, they'll be creating most of a human jobs. I'm not saying machines, I mean, yeah, obviously we'll there will always be a human in the loop, but in that world we need to be a little bit more conscious about where we want to shape a world. Now, you are the author of Blockchain Technology for Global Social Change, Blockchanging the World, and Applied Ethics in a Digital World. Would you like to summarize each of these books so maybe my listeners can understand those books? And I'll definitely leave the links behind for those who want to just go and pick up the books.
Oh, thank you. And I'm actually working now on a book on Web3. So if people are interested, look, what I really try to do is to make the information digestible for people who want to learn about it. Because when I started talking about blockchain for social change in 2016, 2017, not many people were thinking about that at that time. And, I often would be talking about it and people would come up to me afterwards, they go, oh, I never thought about that. I didn't realize. And so I thought that there was just a place to be able to say to people, look, this is the sort of change that's taking place in our society. This is the kind of changes that you could hope for if blockchain becomes widespread around, the democratization and access and so forth. And here's some chapters that tell you, how is it being used for financial inclusion? How is it being used in humanitarian settings? How is it being used in healthcare and so forth? And just trying to, simply explain to the readers, why this is important and who's using it, using, what we knew at the time. Blockchanging the World was just really more, it's a personal story of my journey, because obviously, I completely pivoted my entire life in 2017 from having been in healthcare all my life and having my consulting firm to just throwing myself into this technology because I really believed that, if I could have an impact by getting behind it and talking to people about it. And then the ethics one was with Dr. Ingrid Vasily-Feltes. We'd been doing during the pandemic a series of webinars on digital ethics. And then we just thought, look, there's so many aspects to this that are important. Let's invite, different people, mainly that we'd already had on our webinars, to contribute a chapter so people can, similarly start thinking about, digital ethics in children, digital ethics in healthcare, in business, in blockchain. I wrote the chapter on blockchain. Again, it's a new and emerging field and not a lot is known about it. So it was, again, what knowledge can we put out that people can access and look at? And then similarly with the Web3 book, it's really that, because most people have very little idea what Web3 is all about. And so it's, just trying to simplify that, help people understand the different pieces of it and why it could be important and how it's going to be used in different industries. So I just think there's a huge opportunity for education, but not, that's why I balked at the explain blockchain question, because people don't have to understand blockchain. They have to understand what it can do for them and how it can solve problems for them. I don't know how the internet works, but it does amazing things for me, so I'm happy.
Thank you for making it so simple, because I guess that's the way it is. Today we have a computer in a pocket, a phone, and we do no longer call it a technology, because that's what it's become. It's become ubiquitous, and I hope that nobody talks about the tech stack behind it, but how it's helping them create a better business or better life. Would you like to kind of give a brief glimpse on the new book, the Web3? And since you advise for the World Health Organization, and you've been in the healthcare business, would you like to share some real world applications of blockchain with healthcare?
Well, absolutely. And I want to go to the metaverse, because I think this is going to be very important in healthcare. So blockchain is a critical underpinning of Web3 and the Metaverse, because it allows that exchange of value. But I think that the thing about the Metaverse in healthcare, so let me just talk you through why I think it's going to be important. So first of all, we tend to live in a rather hospital-based kind of system where people go somewhere to get healthcare. And this is unsustainable, it's unaffordable, and we don't have enough health workers to continue to deliver care in that way. And it's not always necessary. So let's just start with scientific discovery. So in healthcare, whether you're inventing a new form of surgery or whether you're testing a new hospital or medical facility, or whether you're doing drug discovery, it takes global collaboration to do that. And what happens traditionally is that 50 people get flown on a plane to somewhere like Geneva, and maybe they spend 3 or 4 days collaborating and talking about things, and then they fly off again. That is expensive, and it's not continuous. With a metaverse environment, people will be able to collaborate from all over the world with humanoid avatars, going in there, talking, sharing, doing PowerPoint presentations, drawing on whiteboards, looking at digital twins of a human body or of a facility or whatever it is that they're working on, and have this kind of continuous collaboration without the need for physical facilities. So that's one. The second one, really important, and this is not just healthcare, is education. So education in the metaverse, and particularly coupled with gaming, is going to transform the way students learn. So in healthcare, for example, the medical student will be able to take a tour inside the human body and see every organ and every artery. They'll be able to conduct surgery as if they were the surgeon doing the operation, and they'll never kill a patient. There's so many opportunities, and you can do the learn to earn, the gamification and the reward for people who are learning, and also monitor their skills levels a lot more precisely. In actual clinical care, similarly, the surgeon is going to be able to have an overlay of a scan of the patient while operating on the patient to allow incredible precision in the work in the operating theatre. I think in preventive care, in mental health for the elderly, it's going to open a whole new world of possibilities. So in health, wellness and fitness, there's already quite a number of these games which are like exercise to earn. Sweatcoin is one, Genopets is another. So the way that you earn in the games is you have to do exercise, and they track that with wearables. Similarly, I'm sure with diet, it's going to be possible to incentivize people to have better and healthier diets. For people who are socially isolated, it's going to enable them to come into the metaverse and interact with others, either with their same problems or just a social group, to help with their social isolation. The elderly who are bedridden will be able to go on tours to ancient Mesopotamia and entertain themselves in ways that haven't been possible before. So I think that there's a tremendous amount of application, but it also means that you can extend what can be done, like avatars can triage the less serious patients, for example, and then refer them to a doctor or a nurse as needed. So there's just a lot of opportunity and possibilities in this area. And as I said, in India, Apollo Hospitals Group are already collaborating with one of the game companies to look at it. And I'm sure we're going to see more innovation coming in healthcare and in India in particular.
Yes, I've been a proponent of Metaverse, and we invested in this for the longest time. I think it's going to create huge transformation. And I also believe that geography is going to be history. And that's the reason I moved from Bombay City to Goa. And so you have also moved from Australia to Dubai. Now, because of India's policies and regulation, there's a lot of startups who are moving from India to Dubai, and there are a lot of global startups also moving to Dubai. So could you share your views on Dubai as a nation, its policies towards Web3 or Metaverse, and what would you advise those entrepreneurs, startups who don't really believe being stuck in a geography and believe that we are getting into a world which is open and so you could function out of anywhere?
Yeah, well, I think Dubai is an absolutely incredible place. The government has such vision and is so proactive about supporting its vision around technology and the metaverse and blockchain and startups. There's a lot of encouragement, there's investment, there's just an atmosphere of excitement and people having a go and trying to be successful. So I think it's an incredible place for technology startups. And it's an incredible place to learn because this is really a conference center of the world. So almost during the cooler season, every week you can go to a blockchain, AI, metaverse, anything you want to learn about conference. And nearly all of the thought leaders in the world pass through here at some stage. So you have the opportunity to learn so much by being here. So this is a great place for startups to come. The government's got, I think, 100,000 golden visas for software developers, and there are various other incentive packages that they're offering, to get companies to come and set up in Dubai. And, they are open to all sorts of ideas about the future. And I think it's that thing that they didn't have legacy systems. So, this was a desert place 50 years ago. And so they've had the good fortune of being able to kind of build a new world without legacy systems inhibiting them. But, I just think that there is such vision here and such opportunity. It's an incredible place to come. To your point about where you are, you're absolutely right. I was talking to a startup here last night at an event that I was at, and they were going, well, some of our team are here, some of our team are in China, some of our team are in Serbia, some of our team are in Singapore. They've just got people all around the world because we really learnt to collaborate online during the pandemic, and people are now just used to working with distributed teams. So I think you can be anywhere, but there's a lot to be said for being in a place like this where there's such a vibrant, encouraging community that you can meet people and, everyone's struggling through the same thing and some people are having successes, but everyone's trying and everyone's having ideas. So I love it here. I think it's an incredible place.
Lovely. Thank you, Doctor. Really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. My last question to you. Any strategic advice you can share to those entrepreneurs, to be future ready and build a good business? And my second question, could you paint a picture of what the world could look like in 10 years with blockchain specifically as a technology?
Yeah, okay. So, look, I think for the entrepreneurs, I think is just like, let your imagination go free. For me, the exciting things are, because you're talking about jobs, there will be jobs in the future, but they'll be really different sorts of jobs. So, try and think about what you can build to take us into that future and to create these new economies. But, you've got to solve a problem. So I think for startups, I know there are some that just make money immediately. Most startups, it's hard work and you have to be resilient and you have to persist and you have to follow your dream even when you're down to your last $20 or something like that. So, I think if you have a dream, follow it, because the worst thing that can happen is that you fail. And even if you fail, you'll have learned a lot of lessons. And so the next time you go, you're going to be doing it a lot better. In terms of the world, I think that's a really big question, because you alluded to the fact that geography is no longer important. So we're going to have effectively these virtual nations of people with millions or even billions of members who are coming together around an issue that they're interested in. But I just hope that we move away from this greed economy, which is just all about growth and making the rich richer, and that we think about putting people first, we think about inequality, and we think about, the planet that we all live on, and that we distribute wealth and benefit much more easily. And I think that, technology is going to enable us to do that, but it does mean that there are people in the world who might not have so much in order to give others a little bit more. But I think it's a better world if we can achieve that.
Doctor, really, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Yes, I think we're in an exciting space. Like I mentioned earlier into the conversation, there are these entrepreneurs who are trying to build money without the banking industry. There are these entrepreneurs who are trying to, build businesses without its opaqueness, which is more transparent. There's those entrepreneurs who are trying to build organizations which will be run by code eventually. But I think what I'm most excited about is this world, this virtual world, Metaverse, because here we are trying to build a virtual world without governments, without a top-down hierarchical approach, where people can do whatever they want to do. They can, go beyond, and that's really that's what excites me. And I guess everyone can participate in that if you, and the only way you can do that is by being a lifelong learner, breaking away from your barriers, your veils that's covered for the longest time, and asking deep questions. That's the reason I do this podcast. Through this I hope to nudge those curious lot who ask those brave questions and say, okay, this is possible, and that's the reason I do it. So really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. It was a complete learning experience for me, and I'm sure it'll be for all the listeners. Wish you the very best for your new book. I'll be looking forward for the new book. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you, Doctor. Really appreciate this.
Thank you for what you're doing. It's wonderful. Great to meet you.